Please help me escape my ex-husband. Victor Hale didn't move right away. He stood at the center of the foyer, eyes fixed on Nina, taking in the blood on her sleeve, the swelling on her face, the way she was barely holding herself upright. Then he asked, direct and cold, "Who did this?" "My ex-husband, Daniel Brooks." Victor's gaze didn't soften. "Why are you here?" Nina swallowed, forcing herself to stay standing. "He's taking my son." A brief pause. "Legally?" Victor asked. "Yes," she said quickly. "Or at least, he's making it look that way." Victor stepped closer now, just enough to study her expression. "Explain." Nina took a breath that trembled. "There's a custody hearing in 3 days. He already has a lawyer, witnesses, paperwork. He's saying I'm unstable, that I can't provide for Caleb, that I work too much, that I leave him alone." Her voice tightened. "None of it is true, but it sounds real on paper." Victor tilted his head slightly. "And the court believes him?" "They will," Nina said. "He's done this before. He knows who to talk to, what to say. He knows how to look like the reasonable one." Victor's tone remained calm. "And tonight?" Nina's fingers curled tightly at her sides. "He came to my apartment, waited outside, showed me the documents." She hesitated, then added, "He wanted me to panic." "Did you?" "Yes." She met his eyes. "But I didn't agree to anything." Victor watched her for a moment. "So he hit you?" Nina nodded once. "He said if I fight him, he'll make sure I lose everything. Not just custody. My job. My reputation." Her voice dropped. "He said I won't even be allowed near my son." Victor didn't react to the emotion. He focused on facts. "Where is the child now?" "With my neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez." "Is that safe?" "No," Nina answered honestly, "but it was the only place I could go." Victor turned slightly. "Marco." "Yes, sir." "Send a car. Bring the boy here." Nina looked at him, startled. "You'll protect him?" "I'll remove him from immediate risk," Victor corrected. Then he looked back at her. "That's not the same thing." Nina nodded quickly. "That's enough. That's more than enough." Victor studied her again. "Why didn't you go to the police?" "I did before," she said. "They filed reports. Nothing changed. He always comes back calmer, smarter." She paused. "He doesn't break the law in ways that matter on paper." "And restraining orders?" "He ignores them just enough not to get caught." Victor's eyes narrowed slightly. "So you came here instead?" "Yes." "Why?" Nina didn't hesitate this time. "Because he's not afraid of the law, but he would be afraid of you." The words hung in the air. Victor didn't respond immediately. "That's a dangerous assumption. It's the only one I have left." Silence stretched between them for a few seconds. Victor finally asked, "What exactly do you want from me?" Nina took a step forward, despite the pain. "Protection. For me and my son. And help in court." "That's not a small request." "I know. It involves my time, my people, my resources." "Yes. And in return?" Nina blinked. I'll keep working. I won't cause problems. I won't speak about anything I see or hear here." Victor shook his head slightly. "You already do that. That's your job." Nina hesitated, then said quietly, "Then tell me what you want." Victor looked at her for a long second. "I'm not interested in charity cases." "I'm not asking for charity," Nina replied, her voice steadier now. "I'm asking for a chance to keep my son." Victor's gaze sharpened, noticing the shift. She wasn't begging the same way anymore. Still desperate, but more controlled. "Does your ex-husband have anything else?" he asked. "Criminal history. Financial leverage. Anything that can be used against him." Nina shook her head. "Nothing official. But he's connected. He knows people. That's how he keeps getting away with things." Victor considered that. "Names?" "I don't have proof, just patterns." "That's not enough for court." "I know," she said. "That's why I came here." Victor exhaled slowly, as if weighing cost versus outcome. At that moment, Marco returned. "The boy is on the way. 10 minutes. Nina closed her eyes briefly, relief flashing across her face before she forced herself back under control. Victor noticed. "If I help you," he said, "this doesn't stay simple." "I don't need simple. You'll be questioned, pressured. Your past will be examined. Every mistake you've ever made will be used against you." "I already know that." You might lose anyway. Nina didn't flinch. Then I'll lose fighting. Victor held her gaze. And your ex-husband won't stop. Men like him escalate when they lose control. I know that too. Then why come here? He asked again, more quietly this time. Nina answered without hesitation. Because I'd rather face something dangerous than something certain. That answer landed differently. Victor took a step back, decision forming. If I get involved, he said. You follow my instructions. Completely. Nina nodded. Yes. No independent decisions. No emotional reactions in court. No contact with your ex-husband unless I approve it. Understood. And if I tell you to do something you don't like? Nina swallowed, then said, if it keeps my son safe, I'll do it. Victor studied her one last time, measuring whether she meant it. Then he nodded once. Fine, he said. Nina's breath caught. You'll help me? I'll make sure the court sees a version of the truth that holds, Victor replied. And I'll make sure your son isn't taken from you without a fight. That was all she needed. Thank you, she whispered. Victor turned away slightly. Don't thank me yet. We haven't won anything. Nina nodded, gripping the edge of the table to steady herself. For the first time since Daniel had shown up that night, her fear wasn't in control anymore. It was still there, sharp and real, but now it had direction. And that changed everything. Nina didn't sleep. Even after Mrs. Bell insisted she sit, even after someone brought a first aid kit and cleaned the cut on her lip, even after Victor's security confirmed that Caleb was upstairs in a guest room with Mrs. Alvarez watching over him, Nina's body refused to rest. She sat at the edge of a leather chair in a quiet sitting room just off the main hall. Hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. Replaying every word Victor Hale had said. If I help you, you follow my instructions. Completely. She had agreed without hesitation. Now the weight of that agreement was settling in. The door opened without a knock. Victor stepped in, sleeves rolled slightly now, tie loosened just enough to suggest the night had shifted from formal business to something more personal, though nothing about him truly relaxed. He closed the door behind him and remained standing. You should be asleep, he said. I can't, Nina answered honestly. I didn't ask if you could. I'm telling you that you should. You have a court hearing in 3 days. You'll need a clear head. Nina shook her head slightly. If I sleep, I'll start thinking. And if I start thinking, I'll remember everything he said tonight. Victor watched her for a second, then moved to the chair across from her. He didn't sit immediately. Good, he said. Then let's use that. Nina frowned, not understanding. He sat down. We don't have the luxury of emotion right now. What matters is what can be proven, what can be built, and what can be controlled. Everything else is noise. Nina nodded slowly. Okay, start with your case, he said. What does your ex-husband have on paper? Nina straightened slightly, shifting from fear into focus. He has a stable income, a house in his name, no criminal record, and a lawyer who knows how to present all of that cleanly. And you? I rent. I work long hours. I don't have family nearby. My parents passed a few years ago. She hesitated. On paper, I look like a risk. Victor nodded once. And witnesses? He has 2 neighbors willing to say they've seen me leave Caleb alone. She clenched her jaw. It's not true. I leave him with Mrs. Alvarez or take him to after-school care. Do you have records of that? I think so. Some receipts. Text messages. Think is not enough, Victor said. We verify everything. Nina exhaled quietly, forcing herself to keep up. Victor leaned back slightly. Now tell me what he doesn't have. Nina blinked. What do you mean? What can't he prove? Victor clarified. She hesitated, then said, he can't prove I'm unfit. Because I'm not. Caleb is fed. He goes to school. He's healthy. His teachers like him. That's emotional truth, Victor said. We need structural truth. Nina pressed her lips together. Then I don't know. Victor studied her. You do. You're just not used to thinking this way. Silence stretched for a moment. Then Nina said quietly, he loses his temper. Victor didn't react. That's not useful unless documented. He doesn't hit in public. He doesn't leave evidence when it matters. Her voice hardened slightly. He's careful. Victor nodded. That's consistent. Nina looked up. You've seen this before. Yes. That was all he said, but it was enough. Victor continued. Then we don't try to prove what he hides. We expose what he can't control. Nina frowned. What does that mean? It means we shift the focus. We stop defending you and start questioning him. Nina leaned forward slightly. How? Victor didn't answer right away. Instead, he asked, what does your son say about him? Nina froze. That's not fair, she said immediately. I didn't ask if it was fair, Victor replied. I asked what the child says. Nina looked down at her hands. He says his dad gets angry, that he yells, that he doesn't like when Caleb talks too much. Victor waited. Nina swallowed. He asked me once if being quiet would make his dad nicer. That one question from a child. It stays with you, doesn't it? If this moment hit you the way it should, take a second right now wherever you're watching and tell me in the comments. What would you do if you were in Nina's place? Would you fight the same way, or choose differently? Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories that speak to truth, justice, and the choices that define us. That detail sat heavily in the room. Victor's expression didn't soften, but something in his posture shifted. Children don't fabricate patterns, he said. They respond to them. Nina looked up. You're not suggesting we use Caleb. I'm suggesting we don't ignore the most honest witness in the situation. Nina shook her head. He's 7, and he's already adapting to fear, Victor replied calmly. That matters. Nina didn't respond. Victor stood, walking slowly toward the window. Rain still tapped lightly against the glass now, softer than before. The court will look at stability, environment, and influence, he said. Right now, your ex-husband is presenting himself as stable and you as unstable. We reverse that. Nina stood as well, tension returning to her shoulders. And how do we do that without lying? Victor turned back to her. We don't lie. We structure the truth. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. That sounds like the same thing. It isn't, he said. The truth exists. Most people just don't know how to present it in a way that survives scrutiny. Nina ran a hand through her damp hair. I've never done anything like this. I know, Victor said. That's why you follow instructions. A brief knock came at the door. Marco stepped in. The attorney is here. Victor nodded. Send him in. Nina's stomach tightened. Now? Yes, Victor said. We don't wait. A man in his early 50s entered moments later, carrying a slim leather briefcase. He moved with quiet confidence, his expression alert but controlled. Mr. Hale, he said, offering a nod. Mr. Carter, Victor replied. This is Nina. The lawyer's eyes shifted to her, quickly assessing. You've had a difficult night. That's one way to put it, Nina said. He gave a small, understanding nod. Let's not waste time. I've reviewed the basic situation on the way over. We need to file an emergency motion before morning. Nina blinked. That fast? Yes, Carter said. Speed matters. If your ex-husband is as prepared as you say, he's already setting the narrative. We interrupt that. Victor gestured slightly. Sit. They all took seats around a low table. Carter opened his briefcase. I need details. Everything. Work schedule. Childcare arrangements. Financial records. School reports. Medical history for your son. Nina nodded, trying to keep up. I have most of that at home. We'll send someone to retrieve it, Victor said. Nina glanced at him. That's not necessary. I can go. No, Victor cut in. You don't leave this house tonight. She didn't argue. Carter continued. We're also going to file for a temporary protective order. Nina hesitated. I've tried that before. This time you won't be doing it alone, Carter replied calmly. Victor leaned back slightly. And we'll make sure it sticks. Nina looked between them. How? Carter closed his folder. By making sure the court sees a consistent, documented pattern, not just an incident. Victor added, and by making it clear that your ex-husband's behavior carries consequences beyond a courtroom. Nina understood what that meant without needing it explained. Silence settled again, but it felt different now, less like fear, more like pressure building in a direction. Carter stood. I'll begin drafting immediately. I'll need you to stay available for questions. I will, Nina said. After he left, Nina remained standing, her mind racing. Victor watched her. This is the part where most people hesitate. Nina looked at him. I don't have that option. No, he agreed. You don't. She took a steadying breath. What happens next? Victor adjusted his cuffs, returning to that controlled, precise version of himself. Next, we make sure your ex-husband understands something very clearly. Nina waited. Victor's voice was calm, almost quiet. He picked the wrong fight. For the first time that night, Nina didn't feel like she was reacting anymore. She felt like something had started. Nina barely noticed when the house grew quiet. At some point after the lawyer left, the staff returned to their routines. The lights dimmed, and the storm outside softened into a steady, distant rain. But inside the sitting room, time seemed to move differently. Nina remained standing near the table, her arms folded tightly across her chest, as if holding herself together required physical effort. Victor hadn't left. He stood near the window, looking out into the darkness beyond the glass. The reflection of the room framed him in sharp lines, controlled, still, distant. For a man who had just committed to intervening in someone else's life, he didn't look like someone offering help. He looked like someone calculating consequences. Nina broke the silence first. "Why are you doing this?" Victor didn't turn around. "We already discussed that." "No," she said, her voice quieter but firmer. "You said what would happen. You didn't say why." That got his attention. He turned slowly, studying her again, this time not just as a situation to manage, but as a person pushing back. "You think this needs a reason beyond what I've already given?" "Yes," Nina answered, "because men like you don't get involved unless there's something in it for them." Victor's expression didn't change, but his eyes sharpened slightly. "And what do you think is in it for me?" Nina hesitated, not because she didn't have an answer, but because she wasn't sure how much honesty she could afford. "Control," she said finally. "Influence. Maybe you don't like men like my ex-husband operating where you do." Victor watched her for a long moment, then gave a faint, almost imperceptible nod. "Not entirely wrong." Nina exhaled slowly. "Then what's the rest of it?" Victor walked back toward the table, his movements unhurried. "There are men who understand rules," he said, "and there are men who think rules only apply to other people. Your ex-husband sounds like the second type." "He is. And men like that don't stop unless someone forces them to." Nina held his gaze. "So you're forcing him?" "I'm correcting a problem," Victor replied. "There's a difference." Nina let that settle. It wasn't comfort, but it was clarity. Victor continued, "But understand this. What I'm offering isn't protection in the way you think." Nina frowned slightly. "Then what is it?" "It's structure," he said. "Strategy. Leverage. Protection is just the result." Nina shook her head a little. "That sounds like the same thing with better wording." "It isn't," Victor said. "Protection without structure fails. You've already seen that." She couldn't argue with that. Victor stepped closer, close enough now that she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the kind that came from years of watching people carefully. "Your situation changes the moment I step in. Not just for him. For you." Nina's stomach tightened. "How? You stop being invisible?" She didn't respond right away. Victor went on. "Right now, you're just another woman in a custody dispute. Low priority. Easy to dismiss. Once my name is attached to you, that changes." "In a good way?" she asked. "In a permanent way," he answered. That was more honest than reassuring. Nina looked down for a moment, processing. "So I lose the ability to go back." Victor didn't hesitate. "Yes." The word sat between them, heavy and final. Nina let out a slow breath. "I didn't have much to go back to anyway." "That's not entirely true," Victor said. "You had a version of control. Limited, but yours. You could choose your risks. After this, the risks will choose you." Nina looked up again. "And you think that's better?" "I think it's real," he said, "and reality is easier to manage than false security." She studied him, trying to understand the man behind the words. "You've done this before." Victor didn't answer directly. "I've seen what happens when people wait too long to act." Nina nodded slowly. "And what happens? They lose something they can't get back." That landed harder than anything else he had said. Nina's voice softened. "I'm not losing my son." Victor held her gaze. "Then you're making the right choice." Silence followed, but it wasn't empty. It felt like something settling into place. After a moment, Nina asked, "What do you need from me?" Victor didn't hesitate this time. "Discipline." She frowned slightly. "That's vague." "It's not." he said. It means you don't react emotionally when he provokes you. It means you don't speak unless you're certain of what you're saying. It means you follow instructions even when you don't understand them. Nina crossed her arms again, more out of habit than defensiveness. And if I mess up? Victor's tone didn't change. Then he uses it against you. That was simple enough. Nina nodded once. All right. Victor studied her, as if measuring whether that agreement would hold under pressure. There's something else. Nina waited. You don't underestimate him, Victor said. Men like your ex-husband survive because people assume they'll make obvious mistakes. They don't. I don't underestimate him, Nina replied quietly. I married him. That was enough. Victor's gaze lingered on her for a second, then shifted slightly. Good. Nina hesitated, then asked, And you? What about me? What do I call this? She said. This arrangement. Victor considered the question. You call it temporary. Nina gave a small, humorless smile. That's not very convincing. It's not meant to be, he said. It's meant to remind you that this has an end. One way or another. She nodded slowly. And after that? Victor's expression didn't change. That depends on what you do between now and then. Nina absorbed that, understanding the unspoken meaning. This wasn't just about survival. It was about proving something. Footsteps approached outside the room, and a moment later, Mrs. Bell appeared in the doorway. They're here, she said gently. Nina's breath caught. Caleb? Mrs. Bell nodded. He's safe. A little scared, but he's asking for you. Everything else faded. Nina moved past Victor without thinking, her body already responding before her mind caught up. But as she reached the doorway, she stopped, turning back for just a second. Whatever this is, she said, her voice steady now, I won't waste it. Victor didn't smile. He didn't nod, but he answered, Make sure you don't. Nina held his gaze for one brief moment longer, then turned and walked down the hall, following Mrs. Bell toward the room where her son was waiting. Behind her, Victor remained where he was, watching the doorway long after she disappeared from view, because he had seen that look before the moment someone stopped asking for permission to survive and started deciding what they were willing to risk to win. And that was the moment everything changed. Nina didn't realize how different the morning would feel until she woke up and didn't panic. For a few seconds, she lay still in the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the usual rush of fear to hit her chest. It didn't come the way it normally did. The memory of Daniel, the threats, the looming court date, they were still there, but they no longer felt like something closing in from all sides. They felt contained, controlled, at least for the moment. Then she remembered where she was. Victor Hale's house, her son safe, in the next room, and everything that had changed in a single night. She sat up slowly, her body reminding her of the bruises she hadn't had time to fully register. The door opened shortly after, and Mrs. Bell stepped in with a small tray. Good morning, she said softly. I brought coffee and something light to eat. Nina blinked, surprised. You didn't have to. I know, Mrs. Bell replied, setting the tray down. But you'll need it. Nina nodded, accepting the cup. The coffee was strong, black, exactly how she usually took it when she needed to stay sharp. Thank you. Mrs. Bell hesitated for a moment, then added, Your boy's already up. He's downstairs with one of the staff, eating pancakes like nothing in the world could bother him. That made something in Nina's chest loosen. That sounds like him. He asked if you were okay, Mrs. Bell said gently. Nina looked down at her hands. I'll go to him in a minute. Mrs. Bell gave a small nod and left, closing the door quietly behind her. Nina took a sip of the coffee and let it steady her. Then she stood, straightened her posture, and forced herself into focus. This wasn't a normal morning. This was the beginning of something she didn't fully understand yet, but she knew one thing clearly: she couldn't afford to fall apart. By the time she came downstairs, Caleb was sitting at the long kitchen island, legs swinging slightly as he focused on his plate. One of the staff members stood nearby, keeping a respectful distance. Mom, he said the moment he saw her, sliding off the stool and running toward her. Nina crouched instinctively, pulling him into a tight hug, ignoring the pain in her ribs. Hey, she whispered, pressing her cheek against his hair. You okay? He nodded against her shoulder. That man said I could stay here. Is that true? Nina glanced up briefly, noticing Victor standing near the far end of the kitchen, already dressed. already composed, as if he had been awake for hours. "Yes," she said softly. "We're staying here for a little while." Caleb pulled back just enough to look at her face. "Did he hurt you again?" Nina forced a small smile. "Not this time." Caleb seemed to accept that, at least for now. He went back to his seat, picking up his fork again. Victor spoke without raising his voice. "He's been up for 30 minutes. Ate without being told." "That's a good sign." Nina stood slowly. "He's used to adjusting." Victor nodded slightly. "Children adapt faster than adults. It's how they survive." Nina didn't respond to that. Instead, she moved to stand across from Caleb, keeping him within reach, her attention split between him and Victor. "Sit," Victor said, gesturing to the chair across from him. Nina hesitated for a fraction of a second, then sat. A plate was placed in front of her: eggs, toast, nothing elaborate. She hadn't realized how hungry she was until the smell hit her. Victor didn't touch his own food immediately. "We start now," he said. Nina picked up her fork but didn't eat yet. "With what?" "Structure," he replied. "You don't drift through this. You move, deliberately." Nina nodded. "All right." Victor leaned back slightly. "From this moment forward, your schedule changes. You don't go to work. You don't go back to your apartment. Everything you need will be brought here." Nina stiffened. "I can't just disappear. That'll look bad in court." "It will look strategic if handled correctly," Victor said. "You're not disappearing. You're ensuring stability for your child." Nina considered that. "And my job?" "You still have it," Victor said, "but not in the same capacity." She frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means you're no longer just staff," he said. "You're part of an ongoing situation that affects this house." Nina wasn't sure how to respond to that. Victor continued. "My attorney will handle the legal filings. You will provide information, documentation, and follow instructions. That's your role." Nina finally took a bite of food, more out of necessity than appetite. "And Caleb? He stays here," Victor said, "under supervision." Nina's grip tightened slightly on her fork. "I want to be with him." "You will be," Victor replied, "but you don't hover. You don't show panic. Children read that." Nina glanced at Caleb, who was now quietly focused on cutting his pancakes into small, uneven pieces. She forced her expression to soften. "I understand," she said. Victor watched her for a moment. "Do you?" "Yes." "Then prove it." The words weren't harsh, but they were firm. Nina nodded once. Victor picked up his coffee. "There's something else you need to understand." Nina waited. "Your ex-husband will escalate," he said. "He won't accept losing control quietly." "I know." "No," Victor corrected. "You expect anger. What you'll get is strategy." Nina's expression tightened. "What does that look like?" "He'll contact your employer. Try to get you fired. He'll reach out to people who know you, build a narrative. He may even attempt to approach your son through indirect means." Nina felt a cold edge creep back into her chest. "And we just wait for that?" "No," Victor said. "We prepare for it." Nina leaned forward slightly. "How?" Victor set his cup down. "By staying ahead of him, by controlling information before he does." Nina nodded slowly. "And if he comes here?" Victor's expression didn't change. "He won't." "How can you be sure?" Victor held her gaze. "Because he understands consequences, even if he pretends not to." Nina studied him for a moment, then asked, "And if he doesn't?" Victor's answer was immediate. "Then he learns." The simplicity of that response was more unsettling than anything else. Nina exhaled quietly. "This isn't just about court, is it?" "No," Victor said. "It never was." Silence settled between them again, but it felt different now, more defined. Nina looked down at her plate, then back up. "You said this would change things permanently." "It already has," Victor replied. She nodded. "Then I need to know something." Victor gestured slightly for her to continue. "If I follow everything you say, if I do this your way." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Does it end with me keeping my son?" Victor didn't answer right away. Instead, he asked, "Are you willing to do what's required to make that happen?" Nina didn't hesitate this time. "Yes." Victor held her gaze for a long second, then gave a small, definitive nod. "Then we make sure it does." That was enough. Nina leaned back slightly, the tension in her shoulders shifting into something more focused, more controlled. She wasn't safe yet. Not even close. But she wasn't standing alone in the dark anymore. Across the table, Victor picked up his coffee again, already moving on to the next step in his mind. Because this wasn't about helping. It was about building something that couldn't be taken apart. By the time Nina stepped into the courthouse, she understood something clearly. This wasn't about truth. It was about control of perception. The building itself felt older than the city around it. Heavy wooden doors, polished floors, people moving with quiet urgency. Lawyers in tailored suits, parents clutching folders, security watching everything without expression. Nina walked beside Carter, Victor's attorney, her posture straight, her face composed the way he had instructed. "Don't look at him unless necessary," Carter said quietly as they approached the courtroom doors. "And when you do, don't react." Nina nodded. "I won't." "You don't need to prove he's a bad man today," Carter continued. "You only need to prove you're a stable parent." Nina took a slow breath. Understood. Victor wasn't beside her, but his presence was still there in the preparation, the strategy, the fact that Carter was walking with a level of confidence Nina had never seen in a courtroom before. That alone changed how people looked at her. Inside, Daniel was already there. He stood near the front, speaking with his lawyer, dressed in a clean navy suit, posture relaxed, expression calm. If someone didn't know him, they would see exactly what he wanted them to see, a composed, responsible father. Nina felt something tighten in her chest, but she didn't let it show. Daniel turned, noticing her. For a fraction of a second, his eyes flicked over her face, assessing, calculating. Then he smiled. It was the same smile he used in public, controlled, polite, completely disconnected from the man she knew. "Nina," he said, as if greeting an old friend, "you look better." She didn't answer. Carter stepped slightly forward, positioning himself just enough to break the line between them. "Mr. Brooks," he said evenly. Daniel's lawyer nodded in acknowledgement, but said nothing. The judge entered shortly after, and the room settled into formal silence. Nina sat, hands folded neatly in her lap, exactly as she had practiced. Her heart was beating faster than she wanted, but her face remained still. She kept her eyes forward. This was the part Victor had warned her about. The performance. Daniel's lawyer stood first, confident, composed. "Your Honor, we are here to address the welfare of the minor child, Caleb Brooks. My client, Mr. Brooks, is requesting full custody based on concerns regarding the mother's stability and living conditions." Nina felt the words hit, but she didn't react. The lawyer continued, laying it out cleanly. "Stable home, consistent income, concern for the child's environment." Subtle, precise language that made everything sound reasonable. Then came the shift. "Miss Cruz," the lawyer said, glancing toward Nina, "has demonstrated inconsistent work hours, limited support systems, and emotional instability that raises concern regarding her ability to provide a secure environment." Nina kept her expression neutral. Carter leaned slightly toward her without looking directly. "Stay still." She did. When it was their turn, Carter stood, his tone calm but firm. "Your Honor, the narrative presented is selective. It removes context and replaces it with assumptions." The judge nodded slightly. "Proceed." Carter moved methodically. He presented Nina's work history, her consistent employment, her efforts to maintain childcare arrangements, receipts, records, verified timelines. Nina watched as the story shifted, not dramatically, not emotionally, but structurally. Then Carter paused, and more importantly, he said, "We would like to address the pattern of behavior from Mr. Brooks that has not been included in his initial presentation." Nina felt the air in the room change slightly. Daniel's expression didn't shift, but his attention sharpened. Carter continued. "While there is no formal criminal record, there is a documented history of intimidation, repeated violations of informal agreements, and behavior that directly impacts the emotional well-being of the child." Daniel's lawyer stood immediately. "Objection. Speculation, not speculation," Carter replied. "Pattern." The judge considered for a moment. "Proceed carefully." Carter nodded. "Of course." He didn't push too hard. That was the difference. He didn't try to win the moment. He built it. Nina understood then what Victor meant by structure. This wasn't about exposing everything at once. It was about placing pieces where they couldn't be ignored later. Daniel was called to speak. He stepped forward easily, voice steady. "I care about my son," he said. "Everything I'm doing is to ensure he has a stable, safe home." He glanced briefly at Nina, just enough to be seen, not enough to be obvious. "I'm concerned," he continued, "that his current environment doesn't provide that." Nina didn't react, but inside, she felt that familiar shift, the way he turned reality into something else, something that made her sound like the problem. The judge nodded. "And the allegations regarding your behavior toward Miss Cruz?" Daniel didn't hesitate. "We've had disagreements, like any divorced couple, but I've never endangered her or my son." Nina's fingers tightened slightly, but she kept her posture unchanged. Carter didn't interrupt. He let the statement sit. Then he spoke, calmly. "Your Honor, we will be submitting additional documentation regarding recent events, including medical records and witness statements." That was new. Nina felt it immediately. Daniel's eyes flicked toward her, sharper this time. He hadn't expected that. Victor had moved faster. The judge nodded. "Very well. I'll review all submitted materials before making any interim decision." The hearing continued, but the tone had shifted. It wasn't decided, not yet, but it wasn't one-sided anymore. When it ended, Nina stood slowly, keeping her movements controlled. Daniel approached again, this time more directly. "You've been busy," he said quietly. Nina met his gaze. "So have you." His smile returned, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You think this changes anything?" Nina didn't answer right away. Then she said calmly, "I think it already has." For a brief moment, something real showed in his expression. Not anger, not yet. Something closer to recognition. Then it was gone. "This isn't over," he said. "I know," Nina replied. Carter stepped in again, subtle but firm. "We're done here." Daniel didn't push further. He turned and walked away with his lawyer, already shifting back into the version of himself the world expected. Nina watched him go, then exhaled slowly. Carter looked at her. "You did exactly what you were supposed to do." "It doesn't feel like winning," she said. "It's not," he replied. "It's positioning." Nina nodded. As they walked out of the courthouse, she realized something important. Daniel hadn't lost, but for the first time, he hadn't been completely in control either. And that was enough to change the direction of everything that came next. The drive back from the courthouse was quiet. Nina sat in the back seat, hands resting in her lap, watching the city pass by through the window. Seattle looked the same as it always did: gray skies, wet streets, people moving through their routines, but something in her had shifted. The fear was still there, but it wasn't controlling her breathing anymore. It had changed shape. It had become awareness. Carter sat in the front, reviewing notes on his tablet. "He didn't expect the medical documentation," he said without turning. "That gave us leverage." Nina nodded. He noticed. "Yes," Carter replied, "and now he'll adjust." That word again. Adjust. Nina leaned her head back slightly. "What does that mean for me?" "It means the next move won't happen in court," Carter said. "It'll happen outside of it." She already knew that. When they arrived at Victor's house of safety, the gates were behind them with quiet certainty. The sense of protection returned immediately, but this time it felt different. Not like safety, more like controlled territory. Victor was waiting in the study. He didn't ask how the hearing went. He already knew. "You held your position," he said, looking directly at Nina. "Yes." "And you didn't react?" "No." Victor gave a small nod. "Good." Nina stepped further into the room. "He's going to escalate." "Yes," Victor said simply. There was no hesitation, no uncertainty, just fact. Nina crossed her arms, not defensively, but to steady herself. "Then, I need to know what that looks like." Victor walked toward the desk, picking up a folder. "It starts with pressure, indirect at first." Nina waited. "He'll contact your employer," Victor continued. "Raise concerns. Suggest liability. They'll consider letting you go to avoid complications." Nina frowned. "They wouldn't just fire me over that." Victor looked at her. "They would if it protects them." She didn't argue. "And your neighbors?" he added. "He'll talk to them, shape their perception, make you look unstable, unreliable." Nina exhaled slowly. "He's already started that." "Yes," Victor said, "but now he'll do it more carefully." Nina stepped closer to the desk. "And Caleb?" Victor's expression remained unchanged. "He'll try to reach him emotionally." Nina's jaw tightened. He won't get the chance. Victor held her gaze. That depends on you. The words landed harder than she expected. What does that mean? She asked. It means you don't let your guard down just because you're inside these walls, Victor said. You stay consistent. With him, with yourself. Nina nodded slowly. I will. There was a brief knock, and Marco stepped in. We have something. Victor didn't look away from Nina. Say it. Your ex-husband contacted Nina's employer this morning, Marco said. Filed a formal complaint. Claimed she's unstable and a liability to the workplace. Nina closed her eyes for a second. That was fast. Victor didn't react. Response? They're reviewing her employment status. Nina let out a quiet breath. So that's happening. Victor looked at Marco. Handle it. Marco nodded. Already in motion. He stepped out without another word. Nina watched the door close. You're going to fix that. I'm going to control the outcome, Victor corrected. Nina looked back at him. That's the same thing. No, he said calmly. Fixing implies restoring something to what it was. That's not possible anymore. She understood. Victor continued. Your life isn't going back to what it was. We're building something new that requires different decisions. Nina nodded, though the weight of that statement pressed down harder now. Sit, Victor said. She did. He placed the folder on the desk and opened it. These are the preliminary documents Carter submitted. Medical reports, timelines, statements. It's enough to shift the court's attention, but not enough to secure a final decision. Nina leaned forward slightly. So what's missing? Consistency, Victor said. Pattern. Evidence that doesn't rely on interpretation. Nina frowned. But he doesn't leave evidence. Victor looked at her. Then we make him. She stilled. How? Victor didn't answer immediately. He studied her, as if measuring whether she was ready for the next step. By forcing him into situations where he has to react, he said finally. Nina felt a slow tension build in her chest. That sounds risky. It is. And if it goes wrong? Victor's tone didn't change. Then we adjust. That wasn't comforting, but it was honest. Nina looked down at the documents, then back up. You're turning this into something bigger than court. It already is, Victor said. She nodded slowly. Silence settled between them again, but it didn't feel uncertain. It felt like preparation. Then Nina spoke, more quietly. He's not going to stop. Victor didn't hesitate. No. He'll keep pushing until something breaks. Yes. Nina held his gaze. Then it won't be me. That answer stayed in the air for a moment. Victor nodded once. Good. Another knock came at the door, softer this time. Mrs. Bell stepped in. Nina. Your son's asking for you. Nina stood immediately, the tension in her body shifting into something more focused. I'll be right there, she said. Mrs. Bell gave a small smile and stepped back. As Nina moved toward the door, Victor spoke again. One more thing. She turned. When he tries to provoke you, Victor said, and he will, you don't respond the way he expects. Nina met his eyes. I won't. Fear is predictable, Victor continued. Control is not. Nina nodded. Then I'll stop being predictable. Victor watched her for a moment, then said, That's when you become dangerous. Nina didn't respond to that. She simply turned and walked out of the room, heading toward the sound of her son's voice. Down the hallway, Caleb was sitting on the floor with a small set of building blocks someone had brought out for him. He looked up when she approached, his face lighting up in a way that cut through everything else. Mom, he said, look what I made. Nina knelt beside him, ignoring the ache in her ribs again. That's pretty good, she said, her voice softening completely. He grinned. It's a house. She looked at the small structure, uneven but standing. Yeah, she said quietly. It is. Caleb leaned against her side, comfortable, safe, unaware of the strategy unfolding around him. Nina wrapped an arm around him, holding him just a little tighter than usual, because now she understood something clearly. Fear wasn't going away. It was changing, and if she didn't learn how to control it, someone else would use it against her. By the third day, Nina understood something clearly. Daniel wasn't reacting anymore. He was adapting. The first sign came in the form of silence. No calls, no messages, no visible attempts to reach her. On the surface, it looked like he had backed off, like the pressure had eased, but Nina had already learned better. Men like Daniel didn't stop. They shifted. She was in the study when Carter walked in without his usual brief introduction. That alone told her something had changed. He's filed additional documentation, Carter said, placing a folder on the table. Nina straightened slightly. What kind? Character statements, Carter replied. 3 of them. One from a former coworker, one from a neighbor, and one from a school contact. Nina frowned. School contact? Carter opened the folder, sliding a document toward her. Administrative assistant. Claims you've been late picking Caleb up multiple times. Suggests inconsistency. Nina's jaw tightened. That's not accurate. It doesn't have to be, Carter said calmly. It just has to sound consistent. Nina looked up. He's building volume. Yes, Carter said. He's reinforcing his narrative. Victor, who had been standing near the window, spoke without turning. He's doing it correctly. Nina glanced at him. Correctly? He's not attacking directly, Victor said. He's layering doubt. Nina felt that settle in. So what do we do? Victor turned, his expression unchanged. We stop responding to the surface. Carter nodded slightly. We need something that shifts the weight entirely. Nina frowned. Like what? Victor stepped closer to the table. Something he can't explain away. Nina looked between them. You said before we'd make him react. Yes, Victor said. And now? Now we force a mistake. Nina's stomach tightened. How? Victor didn't answer immediately. Instead, he asked, has he tried to contact you directly since the hearing? No, Nina said. Not once. Then he's waiting, Victor replied, which means he believes he's still in control. Nina leaned back slightly. And you want to take that away? Yes. Carter closed the folder. There's an option, he said. But it's not clean. Nina gave a small, humorless breath. Nothing about this is clean. Carter looked at Victor, then back at Nina. We create a situation where he believes he has an advantage. Something he can't ignore. Nina's eyes narrowed slightly. You want to bait him? Victor answered instead. We give him an opportunity to prove who he is. Nina stood slowly. And what does that cost me? Victor met her gaze. Control. Silence filled the room. Nina processed that. Meaning? You'll have to interact with him, Victor said. On our terms. Her chest tightened slightly. Directly? Yes. Nina shook her head once instinctively. That's exactly what he wants. Victor didn't disagree. Yes. Then why would we give it to him? Because we control the environment, Victor said. Not him. Nina looked at Carter. And this helps in court? If handled correctly, Carter replied. It creates documented behavior, real time, not statements, not assumptions. Nina exhaled slowly. And if it goes wrong? Victor's voice remained steady. Then we shut it down immediately. Nina let that sit for a moment. Then she asked, what exactly are we setting up? Victor moved to the desk, pulling out a single sheet. You request a meeting. Nina stared at him. He won't trust that. He doesn't need to trust it, Victor said. He needs to want it. Nina thought about that. Daniel's patterns. His need for control. His need to win. He'll come if he thinks he's gaining something, she said. Victor nodded. Exactly. Carter added, we position it as a conversation about custody. You appear uncertain, open to discussion. Nina's expression hardened slightly. I don't like that. You don't have to like it, Victor said. You have to execute it. Nina crossed her arms, thinking, and you'll be there. Yes. And he won't know that. No. Nina looked down for a second, then back up. He's going to push. Victor didn't hesitate. That's the point. Nina took a breath, steadying herself. All right. Carter watched her carefully. You're sure? Nina nodded once. If this exposes him, then it's worth it. Victor studied her for a long moment, then said, good. The plan came together quickly after that. The meeting would take place in a neutral location, a small cafe not far from Nina's old apartment. Public enough to avoid immediate escalation, controlled enough for Victor's people to monitor everything. Nina would go alone. At least, that's how it would look. By the time evening came, everything was in place. Nina stood in front of the mirror in one of the guest rooms, adjusting her jacket. She looked like herself again. Not the version of her from the courthouse. Not the version from the night she ran. Just Nina. That was intentional. Victor stepped into the room without knocking. You're ready. Nina met his reflection in the mirror. I think so. That's not what I asked. She turned to face him. Then yes, I'm ready. Victor walked a few steps closer. He will test you. I know. He'll try to provoke you emotionally. I won't react. Victor's gaze stayed fixed on her. He'll say things about your son. That hit differently. Nina's expression tightened for just a second, then steadied. I still won't react. Victor nodded once. Good. Nina hesitated, then asked quietly, what if I want to? Victor didn't soften. Then you don't. That was the answer she needed, even if she didn't like it. They arrived at the cafe 10 minutes early. Nina sat at a small table near the window, hands resting calmly in front of her. She didn't look around. She didn't search for Victor or the others. She trusted they were there. At exactly 7:02, Daniel walked in. He spotted her immediately. Of course he did. He approached slowly, confident, controlled, the same version of himself he always presented in public. But his eyes were sharper now, more alert. Nina, he said, taking the seat across from her. I didn't expect this. I needed to talk, she said, keeping her tone even. He studied her for a moment. That's new. Nina didn't respond to that. This situation isn't good for Caleb. Daniel leaned back slightly. I agree. That alone told her everything she needed to know. He thought he was winning. Nina continued. I don't want this to turn into something worse. Daniel smiled faintly. It doesn't have to. There it was. The opening. Nina held his gaze. Then maybe we find a way to resolve it. Daniel leaned forward slightly, his voice lowering. You mean you stop fighting? Nina didn't react. That would solve a lot of problems, he added. Nina let a small pause sit between them. Only if I trust you. Daniel's expression shifted just slightly. You don't? Nina looked at him steadily. Should I? For a brief second, something real flickered in his eyes. Not anger, not yet, but something close. And that was the moment Victor had been waiting for, because now Daniel wasn't performing anymore. He was reacting, and once that started, it was only a matter of time before he made a mistake. Daniel didn't answer Nina's question right away. Should I? The words stayed between them, quiet but sharp. For a brief moment, the version of him that knew how to perform slipped just enough to reveal something underneath irritation, calculation, something darker that didn't fit the calm image he'd been building. He leaned back again, slower this time. You always did have a way of twisting things, he said. That's part of the problem. Nina didn't react. I asked a simple question, and I'm giving you a simple answer, Daniel replied. You don't trust me because you don't want to. Nina let a small pause settle before speaking again. I don't trust you because I've seen what happens when I do. That landed. Daniel's jaw tightened slightly. Not enough for anyone watching casually to notice, but enough for Nina to recognize. He was losing control of the conversation. You're making this harder than it needs to be, he said, voice still measured. This isn't about you and me. It's about Caleb. Nina nodded once. Exactly. Then stop fighting, Daniel said. Let him have stability. Nina looked at him steadily. You mean your version of it? It's better than what you can offer, he replied without hesitation. There it was. Not anger, not yet, but certainty. Nina leaned back slightly, her posture relaxed, her tone unchanged. You're very confident. I'm realistic. No, Nina said quietly. You're convinced you've already won. For a second, Daniel didn't speak. Then he smiled again. But this time it felt thinner. Maybe I have. Nina held his gaze. Then why meet me? That question shifted something. Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly. Because you asked. That's not enough, Nina said. He leaned forward again, lowering his voice. Because I wanted to see if you'd finally understand what's happening. And what's that? Nina asked. That you don't have leverage, Daniel said. You never did. Nina let that sit. Then she said calmly, You're wrong. Daniel's expression didn't change, but something behind it did. That's the problem, he said. You still think this is a fight you can win. Nina didn't respond immediately. She let the silence stretch just long enough. Then she said, I'm not trying to win. Daniel frowned slightly. Then what are you doing? I'm making sure Caleb is safe. He would be safe with me. Nina shook her head just once. No. He'd be controlled. That word hit. Daniel's hand tightened slightly on the edge of the table. You're projecting. No, Nina said. I'm remembering. Another pause. Then Daniel shifted. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. But it was real. You think you can sit here? He said quietly. And pretend you're in control now? Nina didn't react. That's new, he continued. Someone's been coaching you. Nina said nothing. Daniel studied her more closely now. Victor Hale. She still didn't respond. Daniel let out a small breath, something between a laugh and a warning. You really think hiding behind him changes anything? Nina finally spoke. I'm not hiding. Daniel leaned in, his voice lower now, more focused. You walked into something you don't understand. Nina met his gaze. Maybe. And you think he's protecting you? I think I'm protecting my son. Daniel's expression hardened slightly. You don't get to make that decision alone. I already did. That was the moment. The shift Victor had predicted. Daniel wasn't performing anymore. He was reacting. You don't get to just walk away from me, he said, his voice tightening despite his effort to keep it controlled. Nina didn't flinch. We're not done, he added. No, Nina said calmly. We are. Daniel's eyes darkened. You really believe that? Yes. For a brief second, silence pressed down between them. Then Daniel sat back, exhaling slowly, forcing himself to regain control. You're making a mistake, he said. A big one. Nina stood. I don't think so. Daniel looked up at her. You think he can keep you safe forever? Nina didn't answer directly. I think you're running out of options. That hit harder than anything else she had said. Daniel's smile disappeared completely this time. You don't know what I'm capable of, he said quietly. Nina looked down at him, steady, unshaken. I do. Another silence. Then Nina turned and walked toward the door. She didn't rush. She didn't look back. Behind her, Daniel didn't follow, but she could feel it, the shift in the air, the way something had changed permanently. Outside, the night air felt colder. Victor was already there, standing near the car, hands in his coat pockets. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't need to. Nina walked up to him, her step steady. He's going to escalate, she said. Yes, Victor replied. Nina exhaled slowly. He already has. Victor studied her for a moment. What did he say? Nina met his eyes. He said, I don't understand what I've stepped into. Victor gave a faint nod. That's accurate. Nina almost smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. I told him I don't think he's in control anymore. Victor's gaze sharpened slightly. And how did he take that? He stopped pretending. That was the answer Victor had been waiting for. He opened the car door. Then we're done here. Nina paused for a moment before getting in. Is that enough? Victor looked at her. For now. She nodded and got into the car. The drive back was quieter than before, but this time, it wasn't uncertainty. It was aftermath, because something had been crossed tonight. Not in court, not on paper. In reality, and once that line was crossed, there was no going back. When they arrived at the house, Marco was already waiting near the entrance. There's a problem, he said. Victor didn't slow down. Say it. Daniel went to Nina's old apartment. Nina's heart dropped. When? 10 minutes ago, Marco said. He didn't find her. But he asked questions. Loud enough for neighbors to hear. Nina closed her eyes briefly. He's setting the next move. Victor nodded once. Yes, Marco added. And there's more. A car was seen near the building earlier. Not his usual. Victor stopped. Nina felt it immediately. That wasn't just pressure. That was preparation. Victor turned slightly toward her. From this point on, you don't leave this property without clearance. Nina nodded. Understood. He looked at Marco. Increase coverage. Full perimeter. Marco nodded and moved immediately. Nina stood there for a second, the weight of everything settling in. This isn't just about custody anymore, she said quietly. Victor looked at her. No. Nina swallowed. He's not going to stop at court. No, Victor said again. He's not. Nina nodded slowly, forcing herself to stay steady. Then she said, then neither will I. Victor held her gaze for a moment, then gave a small nod, because now it wasn't just a strategy. It was a war, and they had just crossed the point where walking away was no longer an option. The house felt different that night. Not quieter, not safer, just more defined, as if every movement inside it carried weight. Nina noticed it the moment she stepped into the main hall. The staff moved with the same precision, the same discipline. But there was an underlying awareness now. Security had doubled. Doors that were usually left open were closed. Conversations were shorter, more direct. War had a way of changing space without anyone saying the word out loud. Nina didn't go upstairs immediately. Instead, she stood for a moment near the base of the staircase, letting everything settle. The meeting with Daniel replayed in her mind, not as fear, but as confirmation. He wasn't bluffing anymore, and neither was she. "Your son is asleep." Victor's voice came from behind her. Nina turned. He stood a few steps away, jacket off now, sleeves rolled, but still carrying that same controlled presence. "Already?" "It's been a long day," he said. Nina nodded. "For all of us." There was a brief silence. Then she asked, "What happens next?" Victor didn't answer immediately. He walked past her into the sitting room, expecting her to follow. She did. Once inside, he closed the door. "Daniel escalates," he said. "We respond." Nina crossed her arms slightly, leaning against the back of a chair. "That's not specific." "It's not meant to be," Victor replied. "Specific plans change. Direction doesn't." Nina studied him. "Then give me direction." Victor looked at her for a moment, then said, "We end his leverage." Nina frowned. "How?" "By removing every advantage he thinks he has," Victor said. "Legal, social, and personal." Nina pushed off the chair, stepping closer. "Legal? I understand. Social? Maybe. But personal?" Victor met her gaze. "Control." Nina's chest tightened slightly. "He's already losing that." "No," Victor said calmly. "He's losing access." "That's not the same thing." Nina let that settle. Victor continued. "Control is what he believes he still has over you. Your reactions, your fear, your hesitation." Nina shook her head once. "That's gone." Victor stepped closer. "Is it?" The question landed harder than expected. Nina didn't answer immediately. Victor watched her carefully. "If he called you right now and said he had your son, what would you do?" Nina's breath caught for half a second. "That's what I thought," Victor said. She straightened. "That's not the same thing." "It is," he replied. "Control isn't about what happens. It's about what he believes he can make happen." Nina exhaled slowly. "So we take that away?" "Yes." She nodded. "Then we finish this." Victor's expression didn't change. "We're getting there." Another silence settled between them, but this one felt heavier, more final. Nina looked down for a moment, then back up. "There's something I need to know." Victor gestured slightly. "Ask." "When this is over," she said, "what happens to me?" Victor didn't answer right away. Nina held his gaze. "You said everything changes, that I don't go back to what I was. So what does that mean?" Victor walked slowly toward the window, his reflection faint against the glass. "It means you won't be the same person who walked into this house." "I already know that," Nina said. "I need to know what comes after." Victor turned back to her. "That depends on what you want." Nina let out a quiet breath. "I want my son safe." "You'll have that." "And after that?" Victor studied her for a long moment, then said, "After that, you decide whether you return to a life that nearly destroyed you, or step into something different." Nina frowned slightly. "Different how?" Victor didn't soften his tone. "More visible, more protected, more complicated." Nina almost smiled, but there was no humor in it. "That sounds like a warning." "It is." She nodded slowly. "And you? What about me?" he asked. Nina hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Where do you fit into that?" Victor didn't look away. "I don't fit into anything. I create structure." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I'm offering right now." Nina held his gaze, searching for something more, but he didn't give it. Instead, he shifted slightly. "There's something else you need to understand." Nina waited. "This doesn't end cleanly," Victor said. "There's no version of this where everything returns to normal." "I'm not looking for normal," Nina replied. "Good," he said, "because it doesn't exist." Another pause. Then Nina asked quietly, "Why didn't you walk away?" Victor's eyes narrowed slightly. "From what?" "From this," she said, gesturing lightly. "From me." Victor didn't answer immediately. For the first time since she had met him, there was a brief moment where he seemed to consider the question rather than dismiss it. "Because you didn't," he said finally. Nina blinked. "That's not the same thing." "It is," Victor replied. "Most people in your position would have backed down. You didn't." Nina shook her head slightly. "I didn't have a choice." "Everyone has a choice," Victor said. "They just don't always like the options." Nina let that sit. Victor stepped closer, stopping just a few feet away from her. You chose to fight. That matters. Nina's voice softened. It matters to you. Yes. The simplicity of that answer caught her off guard. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Victor said something that shifted everything. You fought like someone who doesn't belong on her knees. Nina's breath slowed slightly. What does that mean? It means you don't belong where you started, he said. Not anymore. Nina held his gaze, her mind trying to process where this was going. Victor continued, his tone still calm, still controlled, but carrying something new beneath it. You've been living in survival mode. Reacting. Adjusting. That ends here. Nina felt something shift in her chest. Then what replaces it? Victor didn't hesitate. Choice. Silence filled the room again, but this time it felt different. Nina looked down for a second, then back up. And what are my options? Victor's gaze didn't waver. You can take your son and build a new life, he said. Different city, new start. I can make that happen. Nina listened, her expression unreadable. Or, Victor continued, you can stay. Nina's eyes narrowed slightly. Stay? In this world, he said, with protection, with structure, with resources you didn't have before. Nina's voice was quieter now. That's not free. No, Victor said. It's not. Nina took a breath. Then say it clearly. Victor held her gaze, then said, I don't make long-term investments without purpose. Nina understood, but she needed to hear it. Victor didn't look away. You've proven you can stand your ground, he said. You've proven you can adapt. That has value. Nina's heart beat a little faster, though her face remained calm. And you're offering me what exactly? Victor's answer was steady. A place where you're not vulnerable. Nina shook her head slightly. That's not specific. Victor stepped closer, his voice lower now, more direct. I'm offering you a different role in this house. Nina didn't move. And what does that mean? She asked. Victor didn't hesitate. It means you don't go back to being staff. The words settled heavily between them. Nina's breath slowed. And my son? She asked. He grows up protected, Victor said, without fear. Nina searched his face. That sounds like more than just protection. Victor didn't deny it. Nina took another breath, steadying herself. Say it. Victor's voice didn't change. You become part of this family. The weight of that statement hit harder than anything else that night. Nina stood completely still. And what does that make me? She asked quietly. Victor answered without hesitation. My wife. Nina didn't respond right away. Her mind moved through everything at once the night she ran. The courtroom, Daniel's voice, Caleb's face, the way fear had shaped every decision she had made for years. And now this. Something completely different. She looked at Victor, really looked at him, but as someone offering her a future she had never imagined. Dangerous, controlled, protected, complicated. Nina exhaled slowly. You don't do anything without reason, she said. No, Victor replied. And this is yours. Yes. Another pause. Then Nina nodded once, just understanding. I need time, she said. Victor didn't push. Take it. Nina turned toward the door, then stopped for just a second. My answer won't be based on fear, she said. Victor's voice was calm behind her. It shouldn't be. Nina nodded slightly and walked out of the room. Upstairs, her son was sleeping peacefully, unaware of the choices waiting below. Nina stood in the doorway for a moment, watching him, because for the first time in a long time, she wasn't just trying to survive. She was deciding who she was going to become. This story reminds us that justice is not always given, it is often built through courage, discipline, and difficult choices. Fear can control a person only as long as they allow it to, but the moment someone decides to stand firm, everything begins to change. It also reveals a deeper truth. Not all protection comes from systems meant to defend us, and sometimes survival requires stepping into uncomfortable, even dangerous territory. In the end, the story teaches that strength is not about never being afraid, but about choosing what matters most and refusing to lose it, no matter the cost. This video is a work of fiction created with the assistance of artificial intelligence. All characters, events, and situations are not real and do not represent any actual people or true stories. The content is intended for storytelling and emotional illustration only,